we have to talk about the Atlanta Hawks, who surprisingly took the entire All-Star break to decide that they wanted to can Nate McMillan, despite not then having their next guy lined up immediately anyways. But they've decided on Quin Snyder. He's going to be the new head coach of the Atlanta Hawks, and it is believed on Tuesday, the 28th, he will already be behind the bench. The second head coach now out with Trae Young in town in Atlanta. Of course, the rumor mill is going to fly with him getting traded and him being the problem. I'm not going to speculate there because I'm not hanging around in Atlanta, but I'll start with you, Tyrik. What are your expectations moving forward for the Hawks with Quin Snyder in town? What are you concerned about, or what are you looking forward to with him as a head coach?
I do hate that they waited so long to fire Nate McMillan. That just makes me think like they were trying to make sure they at least had a guy with their sights set on. Maybe that's why they took so long. But post All-Star break is just weird timing. But I do like Quin Snyder being the coach for this team. Somebody that's had real deal playoff experience with the Jazz over pretty much a decade. It seemed like he was there for a long time. He has experience, coaching dynamic guards like Donovan Mitchell. And his defense have usually always been good. Now, that is with Rudy Gobert. So, obviously Rudy's not here. But this Hawks team, we think, has the makings to be a solid defensive team at least. So, hopefully Quinn can unlock that. And sometimes just getting a new voice in the locker room really just helps a team get out of that lackluster phase, which I think the Hawks have kind of been middling with the last couple seasons. Like they had to run when Nate did get the job, or at least he was elevated to, interim head coach, and they made that run. Don't think that they'll do that this season, but I think this is more of a long-term move because I don't think they were ever really bought into Nate McMillan. They kind of waited a very long time to give him that head coaching tag. But Quinn's going to be their guy. He's somebody, like I said, with a lot of experience. And this is definitely a long-term move. Hopefully this could just help flip this franchise from being a team that has to take half a season to wake up to a team that out of the gates is going to be one of the topper teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's a weird cycle for this team, man. It's like this fire the coach mid-season, and last time they did it led to some good things. Will that happen again? Only time will tell. What I will say is, Quin Snyder, proven regular season coach. I can't tell you that Clint Capella is Rudy Gobert, but I can tell you maybe they can run some similar schemes because, he coached. Trae Young is a worse defender than Donovan Mitchell, but it wasn't like Donovan Mitchell was like a good defender. And, he made that work, did some good things with some similar type structures, just maybe a little bit more on the extremes with Gobert as a good defender and now having Trae as kind of a bad defender. So a little bit worse of a situation. But there's some pieces, and I think he's a guy who, coming into a situation where they already have a winning record, kind of around 500, I think he can take them far enough instantaneously to where they can secure themselves a top 8 spot. I'm not going to say they're breaking like above the play-in range, but I think they'll secure themselves one of the 8 spots as we get to the actual playoffs. Will they go much further than that? I just don't think they have the roster for it personally. I just think there's at least 4 other teams that would knock them out in the first round regardless. But, the Nate McMillan thing wasn't working to where they wanted it to be. So bring in a guy who's proven and I guess see how it rolls, man.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good fit. Like you say, Gabe, he has that experience in Utah with a young dynamic guard, with a team that plays very well defensively. And Clint can get that job done as a rim protector if he wants to run a similar scheme. Onyeka can get a similar job done. So they got the pieces there, like we've talked about, to be a solid defensive team. They don't need to be a top 5 defensive team in the league because their offense is good enough, and that's been picking up a bit as of late. They're no longer like a bottom half offensive rating team like they were at one point this year, which was arguably their biggest problem. But the defense should be able to be better than it has been, and I think this hiring helps with this. I think his experience and his credentials that he's acquired over his very good coaching career so far will help in his locker room presence as well and being able to lead this team to some level of success. And they need that type of guy in there right now. As much as internally things might be fine, the media is trying to make it so that things are not going to be fine internally. So they need a good voice in there. They're going to need someone who can lead them well. And I think Quin Snyder's a good job for that. I think it's a good hire. And like you said, Gabe, we're only going to see so many of those effects this season, but you're going to pretty much a 20-game head start for him for next year to then get a full offseason, a full training camp with these guys, and hopefully be ready to hit the ground running next year at the start of the season. And like you said, Tyrik, just not midway through the season like they have in previous years. But overall, good signing for them, or a good addition. But
definitely, yeah,
it is what it is this year.
Yeah, like Chris Finch kind of got a little bit of a head start too, and that first year was a little like obviously it's kind of like getting your feet wet and things like that. And then I think the next season is when they made the playoffs, and the culture kind of started to shift a little bit in Minnesota. So hopefully something similar like can happen here because this Hawks team is too talented to not be at least a like consistently good team. Like they shouldn't have to be fighting with 500 all season long until we got to start winning games, otherwise we're not going to make the playoffs. And yeah, they're too good. Trae Young's too good. DeJounte's too good. Atlanta's a great city, a good basketball city. Like they've always had really good teams. So hopefully they can just figure it out. And Quin Snyder is one of those guys, like Gabe said, he's gonna win you regular season games. Like he's that good of a coach, at least in the regular season.
Yeah, I do think as far as like guys to hire mid-season as your coach, if you're not just gonna go with like your assistant as an interim for the rest of the season, he's probably one of the best options just given the fact that he has that high floor. Because, you think about it and it's like, yeah, you could get real experimental and like try something new and maybe it's a bust and maybe it's like the best signing you've ever had. But on the other hand, when you already got a guy like Trae, you just brought in DeJounte, like you have a lot of guys who are probably going to want to try and win some games. I do think it's probably in their best interest, especially going back to that media narrative you were kind of alluding to. I do think it was in their best interest to get a guy with a high floor that could at least keep them solid and keep them where they are now. So things are definitely not going to go down for them if I had to make a prediction and put money on it. It's just a matter of how much things actually go up. Because looking at this Eastern Conference, maybe they could go on a run and pass Miami. Brooklyn's probably going to be on a big downturn. But, like, the Knicks have been super hot, and there's not that many games left, and then I don't think they're cracking the top four at all. So it's like, at max, they might move up a spot or two.
Yeah, which is fine because, like you said, that just is how tough the East has been this season. And that's asking Quinn a lot to, hey, you haven't coached all year, but come fix our team real quick. Let's try and push for a fourth seed. I don't think that's what they're expecting. Probably just make sure we get in the dance, have a successful series, maybe, push the team to 7 if we're lucky, or maybe win a series if we're really lucky, and then make the moves necessary in the offseason to get your team set to really go, at least maybe not all in, but kind of all in because you made a lot of trades, gave up a lot of draft capital for DeJounte Murray to try and build this team towards being one of the more competitive teams in the Eastern Conference. So I think that this is that long-term move, which I kind of like it from that mindset. I'm not a fan of hiring a coach mid-season. I really kind of hate that. Like I was pissed when the Timberwolves did that with Chris Finch, but I understand it in this sense because this is a very long-term move for a team that's kind of set up to try and win now.
Definitely. The fact that it's a long-term move definitely makes it a much better decision as opposed to just plugging those holes for the remainder of the season.